In parts of Tel Aviv last night, residents had no warning at all, no siren, no alert. Just the sudden crack of an explosion ripping through an apartment block, shrapnel embedded into walls, vehicles flipped across roads, and a city that had been under continuous bombardment scrambling for shelter it didn't have enough of. Israel's health ministry confirmed nearly 150 people were injured by Iranian missiles and drones in a single 24-hour window. The country just declared a state of emergency. And most of the world's major media outlets are barely covering what's actually happening on the ground. On March 25th alone, Iran launched 9 separate attack waves against Israel in a single day. 4 salvos hammered the Tel Aviv area. 4 more tore through southern Israel. 1 targeted the north. This was not a single retaliatory strike. This was a sustained military campaign structured in coordinated layers, and it ran for hours without stopping. The IRGC is cycling through Khyber Sheikhan, Ahmed, Qadr, and Khorramshahr ballistic missiles inside the same waves, pairing them with kamikaze drones in varying speeds, altitudes, and trajectories. The logic is brutal and deliberate. When a defense system faces a mixed swarm, some objects moving fast, others slow, some high trajectory, others skimming low, no single defensive layer can catch everything at once. The attackers are designing the threat to overwhelm the geometry of interception, not just the quantity. And roughly 40% of all that firepower is aimed at one specific place, Greater Tel Aviv. 4 million people. Many of them, as we are about to see, living in areas where the warning systems gave residents less time than it takes to cross a room. The scale of what's happening there right now is something the numbers alone don't fully capture, but the numbers are where we need to start, because one specific statistic is being used to paper over what is, by any honest measure, a national disaster in slow motion. Israeli officials have been consistently quoting a 92% interception rate. On the surface, that sounds like a success story. The defense is holding, the shield is working, nearly every missile is being stopped. Iran has fired over 440 ballistic missiles at Israel since this campaign began. An 8% failure rate across 440 missiles means approximately 35 warheads successfully reached their targets. 35 warheads landing inside one of the most densely populated countries on Earth, in a nation roughly the size of New Jersey, where the distance between a missile impact site and a school, a hospital, or a residential block can be measured in meters, not miles. 35 direct hits is not a statistic to be proud of. It is a national emergency dressed up in a percentage, and officials inside the Israeli security apparatus know it. One told the financial outlet Calculist that the cumulative impact of what's falling is creating shrapnel impact scenes across all of Israel that are barely being counted. The 92% figure is real. The comfort people are supposed to draw from it is not. And the reason that failure rate keeps producing casualties every single time has everything to do with what Iran has been loading inside those warheads. Because Iran is not just firing more missiles. Iran has fundamentally changed what those missiles do when they arrive. Nearly half of the missiles Iran has fired at Israel carry cluster munitions. To understand why that matters, you have to understand how Israel's defense architecture was designed, and what assumption it was built around. Iron Dome handles short-range rockets. David's Sling handles medium-range threats. The Arrow system handles ballistic missiles coming in from high altitude. 3 layers, 3 overlapping coverage zones. Together they form the most sophisticated layered air defense system any country has ever deployed. And it was built on one fundamental premise. One incoming warhead, one interception problem. Track it. Calculate the trajectory. Destroy it before it reaches population centers. Cluster warheads shatter that premise. According to Israeli military officials, these cluster warheads break apart at roughly 7,000 to 10,000 meters altitude, before they're anywhere near the terminal guidance zone where interception is most effective. When they split, they typically release approximately 24 submunitions. Each one falls on its own arc. Each one carries lethal explosive force. And each one becomes an independent interception problem that the system was never designed to handle simultaneously. Brussels-based military analyst Elijah Magner confirmed that Iran first trialed this capability during the 12-day war in June 2025. That conflict was the test run. What we are watching now is the full operational deployment of something that was quietly proven to work. When a single inbound warhead suddenly becomes 24 independent bomblets at altitude, the defense system faces a choice that has no clean answer. Ignore the submunitions and accept civilian casualties on the ground, or fire multiple interceptors at individual bomblets and burn through interceptor stockpiles at a rate that cannot be sustained across a prolonged conflict. Neither option is acceptable. Both options are being forced on Israel simultaneously. Brigadier General Ran Kochaf, in the reserves, admitted publicly that Israel can intercept only a limited portion of the submunitions. That word limited, coming from a senior military figure, is not a press release phrase. It is an acknowledgement that the defensive architecture has a structural gap it was not built to close. The gap between what the defense system can do and what the incoming weapons demand isn't abstract. It has addresses, it has names, it has children's ages attached to it. On March 22nd, 2 Iranian ballistic missiles struck the towns of Arad and Dimona. Israeli air defenses failed to intercept either of them. Reuters reported that in Arad alone, 31 people were hospitalized in the aftermath, including 18 children. At least 9 of those children were in serious condition. The AP confirmed that more than 150 people were treated overall across both strikes, making it one of the worst mass casualty events of this entire war. The deadliest single strike came earlier, on March 1st, when a missile hit a synagogue and neighboring homes in Beit Shemesh, 18 miles from Jerusalem. 9 civilians were called. Dozens more were wounded. A place of religious gathering on a Friday, in a city that had spent months practicing how to respond to sirens, simply did not survive the impact. On March 18th, reports claim the IRGC fired cluster warheads at central Israel, claiming the strike as retaliation for the killing of Ali Larijani, secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. 2 people died in Ramat Gan, a couple in their 70s who had a safe room in their home and still couldn't reach it. The sirens in their neighborhood gave less than 90 seconds of warning. For an elderly couple, 90 seconds is not enough time to get across an apartment, let alone descend a stairwell and reach a reinforced room. On March 24th, a missile hit a Tel Aviv apartment block directly. 4 people were injured, 3 buildings were heavily damaged. Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Huldai said the main structure may need to be completely demolished. And then came a figure from a Knesset committee briefing that should alarm anyone paying attention to the civilian reality here. 11% of Tel Aviv residents cannot reach a protected shelter within a reasonable time frame during an active siren. The city has 560 standard protection facilities and 20 portable shelters, and it is still not enough. Residents in South Tel Aviv have described the shelters that do exist as overcrowded, vandalized, and unsafe, with altercations breaking out inside them during active attacks. 1 in 10 people in a city under daily bombardment has nowhere safe to go. A David Sling interceptor costs approximately $320,000 per shot. An Arrow 3 interceptor runs about $650,000. The Iranian ballistic missiles being fired at Israel cost somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000 to produce. That means Israel is consistently spending more money to defend each engagement than Iran is spending to attack. Every single exchange is a net economic drain on the defender. In a short war, that arithmetic can be absorbed. In a sustained campaign stretching across weeks with 9 attack waves in a single day, that gap compounds quickly, and it creates a brutal pressure on stockpile management that forces difficult decisions about which system to deploy against which incoming threat. Decisions that sometimes end with a cheaper defense being thrown at a problem it was never engineered to solve. Security officials inside Israel have been blunt about the real answer. One told Calculus that the only genuine solution is the Arrow 3 system, designed to intercept missiles outside the atmosphere entirely, far above populated areas, before any warhead can split. But the official added something that carries real weight. Expanding David's Sling into a role it was never built for does not change the physics. You need exospheric interception. Anything less means debris, shrapnel, and unexploded submunitions falling on residential streets. Russian flying wing drone. Most people watching this conflict think of it as a bilateral exchange, Iran versus Israel. That framework is no longer accurate. Because something significant shifted in early March, something that Western intelligence agencies have now confirmed publicly, and it changes the strategic picture entirely. Western intelligence, published through the Financial Times on March 25th, confirmed that Russia has been delivering drones directly to Iran since early March 2026. These are Garan 2 drones, Russian-manufactured upgrades of the original Iranian-designed Shahed 136. The history here is almost poetic in its irony. Iran originally supplied Shahed drone technology to Russia in 2022 for use in the war in Ukraine. Russia then industrialized production, refined the design through thousands of real-world strikes, and engineered significant improvements into the system. Now the pipeline is running in reverse. Nearly 90% of all Shahed assembly currently takes place inside Russia. Analysts told the Financial Times that Iran doesn't need a larger quantity of drones. It needs better ones. And what Iran is specifically after are the improved engines, upgraded navigation systems, and anti-jamming capabilities that Russian engineers incorporated into the Garan 2 variants during the Ukraine campaign. Scholar Nicole Graevsky confirmed that those Russian versions already exceed what Iran was producing domestically, and that Tehran will likely reverse engineer the improvements once the hardware arrives in volume. Western law enforcement sources added that Moscow has also been providing satellite imagery, targeting data, and intelligence support alongside the physical hardware. Ukraine's President Zelensky told CNN that his intelligence services had confirmed Russia was helping Iran with drone tactics and battlefield information. A Financial Times report separately cited a deal reportedly struck in December for 500 vertical launch units and 2,500 missiles over a 3-year period. though Reuters noted it could not independently verify that specific arrangement. Moscow refused to supply its S-400 systems, the most advanced air defense Russia possesses. But by all available accounts, almost everything short of that appears to be available to Tehran. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov called the reports fabrications. In the same breath, he confirmed that Russia is continuing its dialogue with Iran's leadership. Israel appears to have connected the same dots. It struck Iran's Caspian seaport of Bandar Anzali, a facility that U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth identified as the primary corridor through which Russian weapons were flowing into Iran. What began as a weapons-sharing arrangement during the Ukraine war has quietly evolved into something far more dangerous, an active military partnership between two sanctioned states, one of whom is now in a shooting war with a U.S. ally, and the other is supplying the tools being used in that war. The Strait of Hormuz has been functionally closed since early March. Before this war, approximately 130 commercial ships transited that narrow waterway every single day, carrying roughly 20% of the world's oil supply and a fifth of global liquefied natural gas. That daily traffic figure collapsed to 6 or fewer vessels. 2,000 ships and approximately 20,000 seafarers currently sit stranded. The International Energy Agency described the situation using language it has never used before, the greatest global energy security challenge in recorded history. Brent crude, which was trading around $73 per barrel when this conflict began, peaked at $126. Even after President Trump announced a temporary pause on strikes against Iranian energy infrastructure, extended on March 25th by another 10 days through April 6th, crude was still trading roughly 60% above pre-war levels. The IEA coordinated an emergency release of 400 million barrels from strategic reserves on March 11th, the largest such release in the organization's history. Goldman Sachs projected Brent averaging around $110 in March and April, and warned that a severe disruption scenario could send prices significantly higher. The damage extends far beyond crude oil. Qatar Energy declared force majeure on some long-term liquefied natural gas contracts. 45% of global sulfur production comes from the Gulf region, and that supply line is now severed, driving fertilizer costs upward on every continent that relies on modern agriculture. The UN World Food Program warned that 70% of food imports to Gulf states have been cut off. U.S. gasoline prices moved toward $4 a gallon nationally. California crossed $5. The OECD is currently forecasting U.S. inflation at 4.2% for this year, and none of the countries absorbing the worst of it started this war. The UAE has faced 357 ballistic missiles, over 1,800 drone attacks, and 15 cruise missiles since February 28th, none of which the UAE government chose or invited. The death toll across the Emirates stands at 11, with 169 people injured from more than 30 nationalities. Just this week, debris from an intercepted missile fell on a street in Abu Dhabi and killed 2 people, a Pakistani national and an Indian national, who were simply going about their day. Iran struck fuel storage at Kuwait International Airport. Kuwait's Interior Ministry simultaneously announced it had broken up a Hezbollah-directed network allegedly planning the assassination of Kuwaiti officials. 6 suspects arrested, with reports claiming 14 more had already fled the country. Saudi Arabia is intercepting dozens of drones daily over the eastern province, where the Ras Tanura, Gawar, and Abqaiq facilities sit, the most critical oil infrastructure on the planet. Qatar's capital has heard explosions overhead as its own defense systems engage incoming fire. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the UAE together lost at least 10 million barrels per day of production by March 12th. To put that in perspective, this is not the largest supply disruption since the 1970s. It is the largest supply disruption in the recorded history of global oil markets. Full stop. On the surface, a ceasefire seems like it might be close. Underneath that surface, every party involved appears to be operating from a fundamentally different version of reality. President Trump has said publicly that talks are progressing and that Iran is ready to negotiate. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi responded directly, "No negotiations have occurred and none are currently planned." Pakistan says it is facilitating indirect exchanges around a 15-point American proposal. Israel's government says it is not participating in any talks whatsoever and will continue striking until Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs cease to exist as functional threats. Reports suggest Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered a 48-hour surge in strikes against Iran's missile and nuclear infrastructure in the days leading up to any potential halt, the goal being to hit as many priority targets as possible before a ceasefire that Israeli officials doubt will actually hold. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi reportedly told the cabinet that the military is under serious strain, simultaneously managing operations across Iran, Lebanon, the West Bank, and the Israeli home front. These are not the words of a command structure confidently managing a controlled operation. These are the words of a military stretched to its operational limits. Iran confirmed on March 27th that IRGC Navy Commander Alireza Tangsiri was reportedly killed in Israeli strikes on Bandar Abbas, along with the head of the Navy's intelligence branch. Tehran has not publicly confirmed the deaths. Whether or not those deaths are confirmed, the pattern they represent is clear. Israel is targeting the command and control architecture of Iran's military, not just its hardware. The Trump administration extended its pause on strikes targeting Iranian energy infrastructure through April 6th. Whether that deadline produces a deal, a breakdown, or simply another extension is the question that will determine whether the Strait of Hormuz reopens, and whether global oil markets, food supply chains, and the inflation figures feeding into every household on Earth get a chance to stabilize. The war between Iran and Israel has not stayed between Iran and Israel. It has drawn in Gulf states that wanted no part of it. It has drawn in Russia, quietly and deliberately. It has shut down a fifth of the world's energy supply. It has put 2,000 ships and 20,000 sailors in limbo. It has landed shrapnel on streets in Abu Dhabi, fires on refineries in Kuwait, explosions overhead in Doha,